Well, 22 school-going young people from across Vietnam are visiting South Africa, all in the name of raising awareness about protection and importance of rhinos. These animals are illegally killed for their horns in the country which sold allegedly in many countries, including Vietnam. Now, these youth won in the Wild Rhino Competition launched last year by the Wilderness Foundation in partnership with Investec Rhino Lifeline and Peace Parks Foundation. Now, for more on this, we're joined in studio live with Tanya dos Santos from the Investec Rhino Lifeline. Tanya, welcome to ANN7's Morning VUCA Africa Weekend Edition. Could you give us an update on the initiative that you're holding right now?
Thank you for having me here. So Tanya, about 18 months ago, Wilderness Foundation invited two Vietnamese pop stars, two men and Tan Bui, to South Africa to experience rhinos in their natural habitat in the wild. And they were deeply touched by this experience and decided to go back to Vietnam and start educating Vietnamese on the ground about what is actually happening with the rhino crisis.
Mm-hmm. With that said, a competition was held in which 22 perhaps school children were part of the competition. They came to South Africa, they experienced quite the journey. Can you walk us through what the competition entailed?
Okay, so first of all, Wilderness Foundation went to Vietnam and did an education campaign. They went to 12 schools and they spoke to 15,000 students, explaining to them exactly what was happening with rhino in South Africa. They then had to submit entries into a competition. There were 1,500 entries, so there was a big response. Lots of pictures were drawn, essays were written on how these students would actually fight this issue and take this message back to their communities. And through that, 22 winners were chosen. They arrived in South Africa, having never been to Africa. They'd never seen a wild animal, only on TV or, in a zoo. They'd never actually seen animals in the wild.
Well, I was going to say, Tanya, what is, now Vietnam is obviously an Asian country. What is Vietnam's contribution to the rhino kind of poaching situation? Do they have a market for it? Obviously, it must be large.
So Vietnam is believed to be the biggest consumer of rhino horn, followed by China. And so they believe that rhino horn has many valuable properties. First of all, it's seen as a status symbol by the elite, where they will, if you have a full rhino horn, you are seen to have really been successful in life. Secondly, they believe it's got a lot of medicinal qualities. So mothers use it for teething, for babies, as a cure for teething. And adults use it as a hangover cure. And they also believe that it can cure cancer. So there's a lot of misbeliefs around rhino horn in Vietnam and in that culture.
So the 22 students who now return back to their homes, you mentioned that it's about creating awareness, empowering them to help their communities. What do you hope to achieve from these 22 students with the ripple effects of educating them?
Well, to be honest, I could not believe the difference from, when these students arrived and had this experience in the wild. They actually touched rhinos in the rhino orphanage and then spent a day understanding, what they can do and what they can take back. They were completely transformed. They were so amazed at how incredible these animals are and how powerful they are to our culture and our heritage. And they came up with actual plans. They came up with social media plans, education plans, a lot of going into the schools themselves and educating other students and raising awareness in their communities. So I'm really hopeful that with this community of motivated youth, there will be change in Vietnam.
What's the next step, Tanya? Once you've started to tackle the Vietnam problem, is there anything else on the radar for the Rhino Lifeline?
So at this point, we are putting together plans with the youth in terms of the feedback that they've given us, and we're going to raise funds to try and help them to enact what they're doing in the ground in Vietnam. We also still have Tan Bui, he was a Vietnamese pop star from, I think it was Australian Idols, and he's very passionate and he's partnering with us. It's ourselves, ourselves, Wilderness Foundation and Peace Parks. So the plan is to continue ensuring that their plans are carried out in Vietnam.
Now, you mentioned that Peace Parks is part of the initiative. That's also where Nelson Mandela, Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and various other, founders were responsible for creating this. Today is Nelson Mandela Day.
Yes.
What will you do to perhaps ensure the sustainability of the project, and also what can we expect, for the rest of 2015, making every day a Nelson Mandela Day?
So, well, I mean, for Investec, it's a very significant day for us. We believe in educating in South Africa. So most of our programs are focused around education. So the plan for the rest of this year is to continue with our education plans in South Africa, specifically in Rhino and in conservation. We have partners called Coaching for Conservation. And a number of other programs in terms of our Pro Maths programs, but our focus specifically in terms of sustainability is focused on education.
Now, in terms of the local South African population, just the regular people to kind of get involved and get a little bit more exposure as well, what sort of areas would you recommend, like maybe parks or other areas of interest, to kind of find out a little bit more about the rhino crisis?
Tanya, I actually find that South Africans are relatively well informed, maybe more in terms of communities. So the communities around the parks that don't know and don't understand, there's a lot of work being done to try and draw those communities into the parks so that they can experience and understand why they shouldn't be part of this. And so I think further education and further engagement with local communities is really where the education needs to go.
Well, bringing the kids over, the students over, it seems like it was a success. Is there any other plans of maybe inviting them back again for phase 2? Anything on the radar?
Not at the moment, no. It's taken a year for us to get to this point. I think it was a pilot. We needed to test it out and see if it would work. I think we're extremely happy with the results, and we would look to possibly try and see what we can do further from here.
Well, thank you so much. That was Tanya dos Santos from the Investec Rhino Lifeline campaign. We'll keep you updated as things progress on that end. And moving on to more